All right, I'm calling it a night there. I'm freaked out. We're in the woods. I don't like it. We should probably get to bed. It's late. I don't know. This isn't as fun as I thought it would be.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to sleep after all that.
Yeah, sorry I didn't mean to end it on such a note. I didn't even realize I was going last, and I didn't realize what the atmosphere was going to be like up until this point.
Well, if it's all right with you boys, let's head to bed.
I have a story. The boys around the fire jump out of their skin at the sudden interjection. Looks of pure terror, confusion, and hostility pierce my flesh down to the bone. I look to the four around the fire. I really liked all your little fireside tales. Some of you could have been a little scarier, while some of you tried a little too hard. I begin circling the fire, placing my hand on the shoulder of each person as I pass behind them, and continue to tell them my tale. Is there anything scarier than coming out deep into the woods to read scary stories? There is a silent pause as nothing happens. I can think of something. Anybody have any guesses? I'm all ears. Nobody replies for fear of what might happen if I deem their answer incorrect. I return back to my original position in front of the fire, the light dancing behind the four. I think it would be scarier to be in the stories. My friends glance at each other with strained looks on their faces, now fully understanding what's going on. Connor stands up to confront me.
I don't know what you think you're doing, but it isn't funny.
He steps closer as an attempt to intimidate me.
If you think that for 1 second you're gonna come down here and threaten us...
In one motion, I pull the knife that I've been concealing out from inside of my coat, plunging it deep into my friend's neck. Silence falls over the camp for a brief moment, while everyone tries to collect their thoughts. Before anyone can react, I rip the knife sideways, leaving a massive gash in his throat. I support his body so he doesn't collapse, but his head falls backwards to face the rest of the group, still attached. Even though his spinal cord was severed, apparently his head was still alive, evident by the fact that the rest of them saw him blink and mouth the word, "Run," before I let his body fall back into the flames. Sebastian and Cody peel out of the campsite on foot. Hayden stays. You staying for the barbecue or what, Hayden? I say, gesturing to the corpse burning in between us.
I'm not gonna run and just let you get away with this.
He says. The savory smell of freshly cooked meat in the air turns to that of char as we stare each other down. Knowing what's about to take place, I give a little nod over to the firewood axe on the ground to give Hayden a fighting chance. He starts to walk over to the axe, and I walk in the same direction, away from the fire, so we can have some solid ground to fight on. Hayden picks up the axe and studies it, hoping he has the guts and strength to go through with this. To be honest, I don't really care about his hopes, so I charge at him while he's distracted. Just before my blade reaches him, he looks up and evades my attack, only receiving a small cut in his side that begins to bleed through his shirt. I lose my balance, and while I'm trying to correct myself, Hayden lifts the axe over his head and brings it down on me. Luckily, I regain control of my body and move out of the way. Just like Hayden's dodge, I receive a necessary injury. The axe misses the bulk of my body, but the head scrapes down the front of my shin. The strip of my pant leg is removed, along with all the flesh covering the front of my bone. The feel of the cold metal scraping against my bone is utterly divine and brings a smile to my face. I pant, while regaining my balance once again, this time from my evasion. Hayden charges toward me, axe in hand. While this pain and these new sensations fill my head with bliss, I understand that if I die, I can no longer experience them. So I begin to back up as Hayden nears closer and begins to raise the axe once again. As if I'm the victim in this scary story, I embarrassingly trip over some unused firewood. I crash backwards into the camping gear that's on the ground. I've got to move fast because Hayden is approaching at an alarming rate. I quickly take my knife and cut off the drawstring of the tent bag lying next to me. I roll to the side preemptively to avoid the thick blade as it comes down right next to my head. After my roll, I stand up as quickly as I can, fully expecting Hayden to be charging me. But to my surprise, he's still in the same spot trying to pull the axe free. He'd gotten stuck on or in something heavy and is now struggling to pull it out. I take this opportunity to dash behind him and pull the drawstring against his neck. I make an effort to pull him away from the axe. Eventually, we both stumble backwards and fall. Pulling as tightly as I can, he begins to claw at his neck, doing everything he can to break free. Hayden becomes weak, and I take this opportunity to reposition so I can force him to face Connor's burning body as he lives out his last moments. Eventually, every muscle in his body goes limp, and gurgling sounds begin to emit from his mouth. I stand up and drag Hayden over by the fire so he can be with his friend. I gaze at the corpses by the fire for a little while, admiring my handiwork, when I'm so rudely interrupted by the sound of a car ignition turning over. Now, you might be thinking that this would be bad for me, that somebody's escaping and might go get help, but I knew they would try this. About an hour ago, while they were telling their little stories, I cut the fuel line, so whoever's in that car right now isn't going anywhere. Unfortunately for them, by trying to start the car, by trying to escape to safety, they're giving away their location, and in turn, shortening their lifespan. I sigh as I leave my friends' bodies behind. I start toward the car, my right shoe sloshing with blood from my injury as I move. I still can't quite make out who's sitting in the car from here. I'm only a few yards away, but it's so dark. Whoever they are, I can tell that they're panicking. As the car turns over, it shakes aggressively, as if whoever is in there trying to snap some sense into the steering wheel. The closer I get, the harder it shakes, looking as if the car itself were trembling from my presence. Right as I get to the car, I hear the parking brake release. It begins to slowly roll backward down the hill that it's parked on. I let it go, of course, because I know there's only one way this could end. The hill gets steeper and the car moves faster. The weathered and unstable dirt road takes a sharp turn, yet whoever's driving doesn't take it sharp enough. The car falls off an 8-foot ledge into a shallow stream below. As I make my way over to the wreckage, I'm hoping that the person in the car didn't somehow kill themselves or knock themselves unconscious from this. That's my job, and I'd hate to see that taken from me. I climb down the ledge and pick up a large rock. I begin slamming it into the driver's side window. Glass explodes into the cabin, embedding itself into the driver. So, who's the smart guy? I ask as I peer into the vehicle. It's Sebastian. I can see him now. But to my dismay, he is unconscious. Killing him won't be any fun if he's not awake for it. I grab him by the collar and pull him to the shattered window frame and drop him on the ground. I reach into the car and grab a handful of glass shards and put them into my coat pocket for now. I continue to drag Sebastian over to a dead willow tree bordering the stream and set him up against it. I'm actually kind of glad that he ended up unconscious. What I'm about to do next is a beautiful piece of art. I reach into my pocket, grab the handful of glass. Blood pools in my hand and pours over down my arm. I pry his mouth open with my other hand and shove the bloody mess in. And then take his sock, roll it up, and stuff it in front of the glass. I cut a strip of his shirt off, tied it around his head, keep anything from coming out. I can't wait to show my good friend Sebastian what I've done. I bring his body over to the stream, holding his arms, quickly dunk his head into the water. I pull him back out with a jerk. This wakes him, and he gasps deeply from the shock of the freezing water. With his gasp, he inhales some of the smaller particles of glass into his throat and lungs. He starts to cough and writhe violently. Within a matter of seconds, the sock and fabric covering his mouth is soaked in blood. I turn him around to face me, still holding his arms. He looks into my eyes with pure panic and desperation. We keep eye contact as I force him back under the water. He stays under for longer this time and begins to claw at my forearms. His nails start to cut into my arms as I continue to hold him under the water. I pull him back up, but there isn't much relief for him, since the fabric in his mouth is basically waterboarding him. Some of the glass has cut its way out of his cheeks, leaving long slits and holes in the sides of his face. I bring him back under for a while, and he begins to convulse uncontrollably. I keep my eyes on his until they glaze over. As I'm pulling him out of the water, I hear some rocks displaced to my left. I'm surprised I didn't notice him until now. "What's wrong, Cody? You didn't even try to help your friend here," I say while resting Sebastian on some dry land. One of his legs is completely mangled, bent, and limp under him. I guess he must have accidentally ran off this ledge and onto some jagged rocks below after Connor's death. He must have watched me drown his friend, staying quiet to save his own skin. I stand up, eyes fixed on his pathetic form, and I begin to move toward him. "Please don't," he mutters in a strained and tired voice. He scrambles back away from me with his one good leg in a desperate attempt to save his life. I easily catch up with him, and I look down on him with amusement in my eyes. He goes to speak again, but before he can, I stomp with as much force as I could muster down on his good leg, breaking his knee backwards against the rocks below. I realize that this is the first time that I've actually heard one of them scream. His shrieks echo through the forest, his body immobilized. Since he can't move, I figured this would be a good time to finish up with Sebastian. Just like the others, I bring him over to the fire. The whole way over there, Cody's pleas for help ring out, and we both know that no one is coming. I make my way back to Cody, and instead of dealing with him right there, I grab his arm and start to drag him. By the time we get back, he's gone completely quiet out of what I assume is shock. I sit him in one of the camping chairs, and I begin to dig some shallow holes with the shovel they brought. Cody seems to regain some of his senses because he started to sob helplessly and doesn't stop. It goes on like this for a while, just Cody and I spending some quality time together as I unearth everyone's final resting place. The fire cracked as I dug. The peace is only broken by Cody's sobs. I finish the holes and begin to put my friends to rest by order of death. First, I take the scorched skeleton still held together by melted sinew out of the fire, gently laying Connor in his new bed. Second, I respectfully move Hayden over to his grave as well. Third, we have Sebastian. I remove the wraps around his head and empty his mouth, laying him peacefully down too. Throughout his burial, Cody becomes more hysterical and starts to thrash around. He knows what's coming. There is a fourth hole after all. I can't have Cody's arms working for what I'm about to do, so I go over to my friend, take my knife, and cut the full circumference around his shoulder joints, down under his armpits. He screams, pain of echo throughout the night. The arms are still attached, but now useless. I make sure to tie it off to avoid any significant blood loss. I move him into his personal plot in this little graveyard and lay him in as gently as I can. However, it's not very easy when he thrashes about like this. He's too injured for his thrashing to ruin my plan, but it still seems rude when I'm trying to have this tender moment with my friends. I begin to cover the bodies in the same order that they were placed. I go through the motions and begin to speak to the only friend I have left. You know, it's gonna be hard for you all to read those silly stories after this. Connor's larynx is severed and burned. Hayden's esophagus collapsed. Sebastian's throat is completely shredded and full of glass. And you? Your airways will be fully blocked, stuffed with dirt and mud. Cody continues to sob and cry for help throughout the whole ordeal. I get to a spot in the ground, and hysteria sets in. I'm really gonna miss you guys. Thank you so much for listening to my story. He thrashes harder, tries to scream louder, but at this point, he's basically destroyed his vocal cords. I sit back down, throw some more wood onto the dwindling fire. The wood is bloodied by my hands and revitalizes the flames. I then look to the fore around the fire.